والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن اهتدى بهدى ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما اللهم افتح إلينا حكمتك وانشر علينا رحمتك يا ذا الجلال والإكرام وصلى اللهم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله الكرام ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم بسم الله Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome everybody to our fourth session, and our discussion today inshallah is going to be an interesting one, I hope, for everyone, because it's not everybody's cup of tea. And there's a reason why it's not everybody's cup of tea, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has designed the human being in diversity. Not everyone is the same. Not everyone's intelligences are the same. Some people are strategic thinkers. Some people are analytic thinkers. Some people are creative. Some people are political, right? And I don't mean that in a negative connotation, but everybody thinks in different capacities. Everybody sees things in different ways, and this diversity, if people were to simply ascend above subjective levels of looking at things, this diversity allows the human being, the human beings to learn from each other. And this is what he means when he says that we created you in nations and tribes so that you can know one another. In other words, so that you can learn from one another, because everyone looks at things differently. And so another person's point of view is equally beneficial to your cumulative pursuit of knowledge. Language is one of these unique elements that, albeit some people have an interest in learning languages and have a proficiency in learning languages, and some people don't, language is universal. And when I say universal, we mean universal, not exclusive to the human beings only. It's universal in its literal sense. Everything in the created realm, every object has a language. Every object is in communication with every other object in creation or with the Creator himself. Even if from a human perspective, it may seem that that object is lifeless, is inanimate, it doesn't speak, because speaking is just one domino component of this massive thing called language. It's just one element. This ability to speak, this ability to articulate, this ability to express that the human being has is just one element. And in that one element, there are so many other elements, such as speech from vocal sources or from bodily expressions, like what I'm doing with my hands right now. I'm expressing something in a certain manner. If I was to point all the time, it would be different. It would deliver a different kind of a message than if I was to say, put my hands like this and place myself in a more humble position. And the message, albeit the same words, will be delivered in a different effect. And then how I position myself, how I sit, straight backed or hunched over, how I move my body sideways, from side to side, or how I move my head, how I tilt my head when I speak. All these are body language. And then there is also language in what is not expressed. Silence itself is a language. Not saying something can equate to saying something, you see? And then there is script and writing. There is what you put into other objects in creation, embed into them, that hence act as a medium of conveying what is to be said. So there are multiple forms of language. It's not just the one aspect. And unfortunately, we who at one point were masters of language, Muslims, we were masters of language. Language was upheld as one of the higher sciences in our tradition. We have delineated from that. And this has been primarily the cause of our demise. This neglect of language has been the cause of our demise. For every civilization breaks down when communication breaks down. Every civilization. But ours primarily because it was not just a civilization, an arbitrary one, that a group of people came together and then, the population grew and now we had like a country of our own. No, that's not what it was. Our civilization was guided and was founded and was brought out from revelation. We grew as a civilization as Muslims. And the thing that really kept us together, that glued us together, was knowledge. And the way to acquire knowledge is through communication, through language. Whether that language is coming in from the sources you read or the people you interact with, or whatever you observe in reality and draw out information from reality, that between you and the object of observance, there's an exchange of communication taking place. There's an exchange of information taking place. This is why we say everything in creation is in communication with every other thing in creation, including the planets and the stars and the galaxies and the stones and the pebbles and the dust particles, and everything is in one shape, form, or another in communication with everything else. Likewise, even in the manner in which God Almighty communicates with His creation, with us, by giving us revelation, is through language. All that He says, all that He reveals, and this revealing is through His speech. When He speaks it, He's revealing it. It is a secret that is being revealed and is being done through language. So, language, we say, is the hallmark of human civilization. What comes from modernity and secularism is that science is the hallmark of human civilization, which in their definition of science is material science, that which can enable you to have some sort of technological progression. That's what their definition of science is. And they themselves do not know that that is their definition. But that is their definition. That which enables them, as we discussed yesterday, in attaining that immortality and that kingdom that never decays. That alone is their science and is the hallmark of human civilization. We disagree, respectfully. We disagree. Language is the hallmark of human civilization, and what you are calling science is itself but a language. Science, any science, physics, biology, chemistry, endocrinology, this ology, that other ology, whichever ology it is, whichever logy it is, study of, whichever ilm it is from the ulum, even mathematics. These are all languages. They are all languages that are used to express and to abstract reality. To express what is understood by reality and then to abstract reality, or to abstract reality and then to express reality. Mathematics is not something that just is existent in the world. Mathematics does not exist. Numbers don't exist. Numbers are things that we have given them. We human beings have defined quantity. We know that this is 1 and then this is 2 and then this is 3, and if you multiply by another 3 you will get 9, and if you do this and you do that you'll get this. We're the ones who have made this language. Numbers don't exist in the air. And what I mean to say by that is that when they say that science is the hallmark of human civilization, we say no, because regardless of whether the science exists, the reality will continue to exist, regardless of whether the science exists. You know, when they say, oh, science is true, whether you believe it or not. No. That's completely fallacious. Science is true, whether you believe it or not. No. Reality is true, whether you believe it or not. Science is just an instrument that helps you interpret reality, and you can interpret reality without the science. You don't need science to establish belief in God. Any science, even if it's the science of Aqidah or the science of fiqh or usul or any of those. You don't need the science to establish belief in God. You don't. You will need the science to understand it better, to refine it, because that's what the science does. It helps you refine and quantify things, define things properly, so that you can remove any misconceptions, ambiguities. You can remove all that. But without the science, you can still establish belief. That belief is established by the heart. So a language is that which exists from the heart. It comes from the heart. And if you remember, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَعَلَّمَ آدَمَ الْأَسْمَاءَ كُلَّهَا. He put into Adam, he inspired Adam with all the names. Where did he put them? Did he put them in Adam's brain? Did he put them in Adam's tongue? In his throat? What about his hand so he could write down the names? Did he put them in his intellect? No. He put it in his heart. See, the heart has the intellect in it. The intellect is in the heart. Along with that, you also have what are known as the 5 internal senses. You've got the common sense. We're not talking about that common sense where people say this guy doesn't even have common sense. You know, not that common sense. We're saying that common sense that is sort of a central piece that connects all the other senses. That's a common sense. That's where all the other senses, not just the 5 external ones, but all the other senses of your body and your soul and your heart, all the senses, that's where they combine, they come together. That's the primary point of input of all that information. And then you've got estimative power, that which enables you to calculate. It enables you to measure. It enables you to put things in perspective. And then you've got memory. This is all in the heart. You've got memory, the ability to recall things. So if you want to think about it this way, when you die, you leave this body behind. So the memory component is not in your brain. Because when you will be resurrected, rather, if before you even get there, when you're in the grave, you will be questioned. And you have to remember the answers to those questions. Man rabbuka? Man nabiyuka? Ma dinuka? You have to remember. Where are you going to get the answers from? Why is the Quran called a dhikr, and yet the Quran has been said it is meant for the heart? Because it's the heart that remembers. It's the heart that was in the divine presence. Alastu bi rabbikum? You are all asked about this. Way before you were brought into this world. Alastu bi rabbikum? Am I not your Lord? Bala shahidna. We testify. How did you testify? With the heart. You see? And the fact that you made that testimony, that affirmation, you didn't do a negation, you did an affirmation. You are our Lord. This mode of affirming and negating, done by the heart, this is your internal language. This is why we say language is the hallmark of human civilization. And language is more than just the spoken form or the semantic form. And you'll hear me saying this multiple times. There is the semantic form that a language takes. So you've got Arabic, you've got English, Spanish, you've got Chinese, you've got Urdu, you've got Punjabi, you've got Hindi, you've got Swahili, you've got Afrikaan, you've got all these other languages, French and German. These are all semantic forms. Semantic form meaning it is particular to that group. You understand? There's a form that group has attributed. So in the English language, the semantic form of a tree, because the tree is universal. No one tree looks like every other tree. They're all different. So every other tree out there is a particular. Okay? The universal is concept. It doesn't exist in the world of phenomena as a physical thing. Okay, so the semantic form in the English language of that universal is the word tree. But then in the Arabic language, the semantic form of the same universal is shajara. So if I say to an Englishman, an English-speaking person, tree, he understands because he's associated that semantic form to that universal concept. Remember I showed you the pen and the universal yesterday? Yeah. If I say to an Arabic-speaking person, shajara, he will connect that to the same universal. But if I say to the Arab-speaking person, tree, he'll wonder what I'm talking about if he doesn't know English. Ma hada tree. What is this tree? Huh? If I say to the English-speaking person, shajara, what are you talking about? Because the meanings of the semantic forms are not known to them across the languages, but the universal is known to them. The concept of a tree is known to them. That's what's tying the two together. So that's the semantic form of the language. You have English, you have Arabic, you have this, that, and the other. And all these semantic forms, they work directly with your brain and then with your intellect and then your heart. There is a conversion that takes place. The brain is, as you are learning the different words in a language and the logic and the logical flow and the syntax and the grammar, your brain is wired. It gets wired. Neural pathways are created. This is called neuro-linguistic programming. Neural pathways are created to recognize certain patterns. So when a certain sound is made, the brain can recognize, oh, this means p and a and t and r and e and s. So patterns. So I know what that word means. You understand? So these neural pathways that are created in every language will have a certain flow, will have a certain methodology. If you subject the brain to a different language, of a different orientation, of a different syntax, a different grammar, and a different phonetics, it throws you off. Because the brain is not programmed to that language. Even though the sounds that you're making are the same for every human being on the planet, there's a certain range of sounds, phonemes, that the human being can make, about 100 or so, and combinations of that. The sounds are the same. Arabic has ka, English has ka. Arabic has la, English has la. Arabic has ma, English has ma. But then kalama in Arabic means something, kalama in English doesn't mean anything. You see? Same phonetic sounds. So someone who is oriented to a single language, their brain has not been programmed, the neurons, the neural network has not been programmed to recognize those patterns. This becomes a problem because now the intellect cannot access what information it's receiving. You see, if the intellect knew that language, that other language, it would easily access it. It would easily access any new words it was receiving. Now, if the intellect cannot receive that, then the heart cannot understand it. Because the intellect is what interprets that. The intellect is sitting between the understanding, the essence of meaning. It sits between meaning and form. The intellect has access to form via the brain and the senses, the outward world. And then on this other side, it has access to meaning. So what the intellect does is, this is the form, I know the meaning, associate the two, this is what it is. That's what the intellect is doing. The intellect is interpreting form and symbol and shape and then delivering that to the heart, telling the heart, that's what this symbol is, that's what this shape is, that's what that is. Put these two together like this. That's what the intellect is doing. The intellect is interpreting all the time. Its job is to analyze, its job is to interpret and deliver whatever interpretations it has to the heart. So if the intellect is cultivated properly, given the right boundaries, given the right limits, given the right parameters, given the right procedures, told, and trained to think in a particular methodology, then it will interpret correctly and deliver to the heart correctly. That's what a science does. The purpose of a science is to put everything in an organized fashion for the intellect to work in the right manner, not to work haywire, helter-skelter, this way, that way, whichever way it feels like. That's what a science does. So in languages, you've got all these sciences of the language that deal with particular aspects that open up new understandings and usages of the language. So grammar does something, logic does something else, rhetoric does something else, poetry does something else, literature does something else, speech does something else. All these eventually work hand in hand. They work together. Now, that doesn't mean that without the science, you cannot do the action itself. Remember what we said, that the science itself, whether it exists or not, reality will exist, right? Whether or not physics exists as the subject, the universe will always exist. Physics does not determine the universe. It's the universe that determines the physics, the subject or the science. So the fact that human beings do this, human beings are poetic, you have a science of poetry. But because it can go haywire, it can go in any direction. And people who haven't studied poetry in metrics, you read their poetry, it's complete garbage. It's just ridiculous. It's not different than a rap song without all the beats and the funky tones and everything, and the auto-tune and all that other stuff that they put to hide. When you just take out the vocals, it's complete garbage. It's rubbish. True poetry, when it is spoken, when it is recited, is beautiful when it's done properly. So human beings do the poetry. And so the science is built to facilitate proper poetry, to refine it. Likewise, human beings do grammar. Children from a very early age, when they start developing speech, they'll speak grammatically. They'll make mistakes, but they'll speak grammatically. Children who grow up in English households will always put the adjective before the noun. They'll always do that. It's intuitive. It's an a priori thing that is embedded into us with language, what Noam Chomsky calls universal grammar, which he has doubts about, but this is something that the Muslims established a long time ago, a universal grammar. Imam Ali, when Abul Hasan ad-Duali came to him to ask him that, we need to do something because people are now misusing the Arabic language, and he was concerned about his daughter who was making grammatical errors, Imam Ali said, Aqsamul Lugha Thalatha. There are only three parts to speech, to language. Al-ismu wal-fi'lu wal-harf. The noun, the verb, and the preposition or the particle. It's a universal grammar. So children will do this in any language, in their mother tongue. If that's the language they're entrained in as they're growing up, right? They'll put the words in the right order, but they'll make mistakes. Like a child will say, I put it that there, right? I put it that there. It's hilarious, but if you think about it, he's actually done the syntax correctly. Yeah, he made a mistake in the conjugation of the verb. You don't hold him to task for that. But the fact that he put the subject, and then he put the action, and then he put the object, in that order, it's universal. So you have the science of grammar that refines that. So if you learn grammar, properly, then that refines how you speak. It removes all these mistakes and comical things that one would say, or incorrect things, or things that could end up condemning you, because people make grammatical mistakes and then end up, they end up making matters worse for themselves, especially in dire situations. Anyway. So that's the semantic form, and it has all these sciences, and it has the utterances, and it has the shape and the character and the symbol and all that, right? That's the semantic form. And all these semantic forms are different, which is why they're called semantic, because they're semantic, they're particulars. What's tying them together is the universal aspect, which is unseen, it's ghaibi. So that's the other form of language now. You see, that's what's inside the human being. That's the essential form of the language. That's where you find meaning. You find that expression, the articulation, the tone that is embedded, the emotion that is embedded into it. That's where you find the essential form of the language. How that language is delivered. What's the intent behind the speech? Because there's a will. There's a conscious aspect to that speech. All that is essential. And this is why you find there is a distinction that has been done when it comes to the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Waqi'ah, فَلَا أُقْسِمُ بِمَوَاقِعِ النُّجُومِ. Yea, do I take an oath? I swear by the placement of the stars. He placed the stars like that. He created the universe. He put the stars in different places. Now, if a layman was to just look at the stars, the most he will get from it is they're pretty. Twinkling lights in the black night sky. Other than that, he's going to conclude with saying, it's all just chaos. There's no order to this. Why is it they're all over the place? But somebody who then becomes proficient with those placements, he notices that they are not random. They are fixed, so to speak, but they are fixed. Each one is placed in a certain position. An astronomer now who studies the science removes all those misconceptions through the refinement process. And then understands that each group of stars, each cluster of stars has a certain placement there, and there is a reason behind that. What he has hence done is he's looking at the same thing he was looking at before. What's changed? Something internal has now changed. He has changed his perception of reality from what he perceived was order, what he perceived was chaos, into now what he perceives as order. There's a certain order to that. So there's a reason why it's been placed like that. And likewise, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, just as the stars have been placed like this, so too have the ayat in the Quran been placed like that. Just like the stars. وَإِنَّهُ لَقَسَمٌ لَوْ تَعْلَمُونَ عَظِيمٌ. If only but you knew how heavy or how grave or what an oath this is, how great this oath is, Azim. Then he says, إِنَّهُ لَقُرْآنٌ كَرِيمٌ. Indeed, it is a noble Quran. Noble Quran. It's not just a simple book of literature. There's a nobility to it. But there's a distinction that has been made here. في كتاب مكنون. The Quran, في كتاب مكنون. So the kitab is different from the Quran. They're not the same thing. So when you're looking at that mushaf, don't assume that that thing is the Quran. That's just the kitab in which the Quran has been inscribed. But the Quran is something that is separate from the physical thing. This is one of the arguments that wreaked havoc in our tradition, especially with the Mu'tazilites, such that Aqidah had to be established to eradicate a lot of these rationalistic misconceptions. Now, rationalism and reductionism are very close together. What's reductionism? Reductionism is taking something of an existential nature and then reducing it down to a mundane level in order to understand it. That methodology will always yield wrong results. Always, 100% of the time. It is epistemologically flawed. But this is the methodology of modern Western secular education academics. This is their methodology. Which is why they can never understand consciousness or the heart or love or spirit or soul. They can never understand that because they are not trying to understand these things the way they are. They are trying to reduce them into something material. So they're looking for consciousness in the brain, or they're looking for the heart in the heart. They're trying to see, is there something called love in here? Maybe there's an object here, I can take that out, replace it when my heart is broken. That's reductionism. Rationalism is similar to that. Everything has to be rational for these people. It has to make logical sense. It has to follow a syntax. If the Quran has been written here, then this must be the Quran because it has been written here. This is the mistake they make. And this is the mistake that a lot of these muftis end up passing fatwa on the Quran. And I'll show you where they make this mistake. Because he says here in the next ayah, La yamassuhu illa al-mutahharun. Now, the who there in massuhu, yamassuhu, the who there is a pronoun. What is it referring to, the pronoun? What is yamassuhu referring to? Because if you translate that, it means none can touch it but those who are purified. So which is this it, the Quran or the Kitab? See, in English, you can't do that. You can't just pick. So for example, if I tell you there is an apple and an orange in that bowl, give it to me. Okay, that's my statement. There's an apple and an orange in that bowl. Give it to me. I have highlighted 3 objects in that sentence: apple, orange, and bowl. And then I said, give it to me. What are you going to give me? Are you going to give me the orange or the apple? What are you going to give me? You're going to give me the bowl. Because in English, the syntax, the last object that is listed, and then the pronoun that follows it, that's what is being referred to. In Arabic, you have to know, you have to be, you see, in English, you can pass through English as a dum-dum. You don't have, there's not much to learn in English grammar, actually, if you think about it. I mean, there are complex levels of, when you get into too much semantics, and this is a truth about language. You can go too deep into semantics of learning the sciences of the languages. But anyway, English, you don't, for someone to learn English, they don't need to learn grammar. They don't. Most of you, I'm pretty sure you don't remember anything about grammar. And yet you could be grammatically sound. You'll make mistakes, but you'll be grammatically sound. You can't do that with Arabic. You have to learn grammar in Arabic. You have to. You can't just learn Arabic like that. Because you need to know when something like this occurs, this sort of an occurrence, where you have a pronoun here and there is no explicit designation of what this pronoun is referring to, then how do you know what is being highlighted here? So you have to now understand what is the subject in the context of what's being spoken about. Is Allah speaking about the Kitab or is he speaking about the Quran? Because why would he then compare the Kitab to the stars when it is the Quran that is got the ayat which are being compared to the stars? So this pronoun here is referring to the Quran. None can touch the Quran but that they are purified. But these people make this mistake. And so they come out and say, oh, you cannot touch the Mus'haf unless you do wudu. Or the physical book, you're not allowed to touch it unless you do wudu. Really? I've seen fatwas like that. But let me ask you a question then. If you meet a Christian or a Hindu who wants to learn your religion, and he's serious, he's sincere, and he tells you, give me a copy of the Quran, let me read it for myself. What are you going to tell him? Huh? Are you going to tell him, no, listen, John, I can't give you the Quran because you are impure. You have to go and do wudu. Is that what you're going to tell him? Brother Rajesh, I cannot give you Quran. No. You have to go and do wudu because you are impure. You think he's going to listen to what you're saying? You think he's going to accept what you're saying? You're calling him impure. He's here telling you, give me the book, I want to read it for myself. You're telling him, no, I cannot even let you touch it because you are impure, you have to go and do wudu first. John is probably wondering, I took a shower in the morning, I shaved everything, I'm clean, I know I'm clean. How dare you call me impure? What kind of religion is this? And if this is the case, maybe it's not for me. And right there, you've already lost him. You've lost him. He refused to accept Islam because of you. Because you and your stupidity went in and looked at these ayat and deduced a fatwa from that no one can touch the physical book unless they have been purified. That's not what it means, Maulana Sahab. That's not what it means. It means you cannot touch the Quran, not the physical kitab. What's the difference? The physical kitab is physical. It's kitab. Okay? Like this book. Physical. The Quran is the essence that has been embedded into this physical kitab. How has it been embedded into this kitab? Was it made with the paper? Did they put it into the machine when they were milling the paper? No. Was it put into the ink? Was it mixed with the ink? No. When they were writing it, what were they writing? They were writing the shapes, the forms, the symbols. Those shapes, forms, symbols, they represent meaning. That meaning is the essence. Because you cannot see meaning. You cannot touch meaning. You cannot taste it. It is ghaib. It is existential. It is essence. That is the Quran. Because the speech of Allah is from Him. It cannot have a material composition. And so you cannot call this kitab the Quran because this kitab is physical. It has a material composition. The speech of Allah does not have material composition. It exists independent of this created realm. That's the speech of Allah. Now some ulama argue, okay, so when you recite the Quran, it comes into sound, or when you write it, it comes into, then it can be. No, it cannot be. What it is doing there, or what's happening in that instance, is it's taking on a created form. It's just taking on a form. But it itself, which is why the pronoun here, the it, is in reference to the essence, the Quran. It itself is independent of any material physical form. That includes sound. That includes the recitation. It includes the kitab. It includes whatever is written here. Now, if that is the essential form, and the essential form, as we said, was meant for the heart, then this statement here does not mean if you don't have wudu. It means if you are not purified of the heart. لا يمسه إلا المطهرون. And the mutahharun is not, it's Allah who purifies you. He is the one who decides when you are ready to receive it. But you have to be in the process of purifying your heart in order for you to have that intimate connection with the Quran. There has to be a link between the knower and the thing that is to be known. If you want to know the Quran, That's the knowledge, the knowing. If you want to know the Quran, in order to understand the Quran, which is ma'rifah, you have to have an intimate connection between your heart, your heart, and the Quran. And it cannot be such that one is pure and the other is impure and they have a connection. That cannot be such. You cannot have such a connection. The pure and the impure cannot have a connection. They are distinct entities. In the same way that knowledge and ignorance cannot blend together. You cannot be knowledgeable and ignorant in the same capacity. You cannot be pure and impure at the same time. You can't be clean and dirty at the same time. You are either clean or you're dirty. You are either pure or impure. You are either knowledgeable or ignorant. Understand? If you have a relationship where you've got a couple, a man and a woman, they both have to have the same link. One cannot be, sitting on the fence while the other one is ready to make a commitment. It won't work. There'll always be problems, right? You both have to be in the same page to say we want to have a relationship. Otherwise, it won't work. So likewise, your heart has to have a purity of the same capacity as the Quran, because Allah's speech is pure. It is untainted. He has perfected it. No one can change that. No one can ruin it. In Surah Al-Kahf, he says, Alhamdulillahi alladhi anzala ala abdihi al-kitab wa lam yaj'al lahu iwaj. He has not put any corruption in it. There is nothing in that. Allah's speech is pure. So your heart has to have purity in order to have this connection. Now we are in the crucible of abstinence, which we affirm is the month of the Quran. So if your heart is impure, how are you going to have that connection? It's not enough to just recite the Quran, read the Quran. I've seen people do this. Very shameful. Very, very shameful of you. For the first time in the entire year, you decided to crack open the spine of this brand new mushaf. And then you're sitting there and the only thing you're doing is moving your eyes along the lines. I'm reading the Quran. Oh, okay. What's the difference between that and reading the newspaper? Is that, or a novel? Is that the capacity that you have brought it down to? This is a reductionist manner of thinking. Oh, I'm reading the Quran. The bare minimum is to recite the Quran, not to read the Quran. Iqra does not mean read. Iqra means to recite the Quran. A lot of people interpret that as, or translate that as read. It's not to read, and if at all, it is not to read the way you would read any other book. The bare minimum is to recite the Quran audibly, bring the voice out, open your heart out. Even if you don't understand the words, that's the bare minimum. But you shouldn't restrict yourself to that bare minimum either. You should at least understand what you are reciting so that your heart can feel it. If you don't understand the speech, it's just sound. It's like somebody speaking in a different language. And you don't know what those words mean, so they don't affect you. And the speech of Allah was meant for your heart, was meant to affect your heart. So it doesn't really matter if you sit there and read the Quran. Now, how will you understand it if you don't study the language? Now, a lot of people ask me this question, do I have to study Arabic to learn, to study, to read the Quran, to understand the Quran? Do I have to study Arabic to understand the deen? And some people will say Arabic is not a premise for that, because you can still feel an effect of the recitation of the Quran on just recitation alone? And yes, you can. You can. Before I learned Arabic, just simply listening to a Qari reciting the Quran in that tone and melody, I felt emotion. Sometimes you wouldn't feel anything, sometimes you do. But you don't want to just feel a feeling. You don't want to be in a situation where it's just a fleeting moment of whatever you're feeling at that moment. You want to understand the speech of God so that you understand it in its full capacity. So if you listen to somebody like Abdul Basit, Qari Abdul Basit, right? When he recites the Quran, he puts his melody and his tone in areas which they have a certain meaning that must be expressed. So he will go high in certain areas, he will go low in certain areas, he will prolong certain areas. And all that, if you understand it, and then you listen to the Qari, your outlook will change. Your tongue will be sweet. You will understand the speech of Allah. I guarantee you this. Give it a try. Do this for your homework today, all right? Very simple exercise, and you'll find the recitation on YouTube even. Look for Qari Abdul Basit's, the Egyptian Qari. He passed away. Abdul Basit Abdul Samad. Look for his recitation on Surah Al-Duha. وَالدُّهَا وَاللَّيْلِ إِذَا سَجَى مَا وَدَّعَكَ رَبُّكَ وَمَا قَلَى. Before you do that, before you listen to that, I want you to sit down and write down the whole surah. It's a short surah. Write it down by hand. Okay? This will foremost test your ability to write Arabic and to write it beautifully. It will give you a gauge of where you are. Write it down by hand. Make sure that you go back and refine any mistakes you make, because you'll make mistakes. Okay? If you make mistakes, don't be disheartened. Just cross it out, go to the next line, write it again. Okay? Don't throw away whatever you write. If you make any mistakes or don't throw it away, keep it. Okay? If you want to dispose, burn it. Don't put it in the garbage. Then look for a good translation. Normally you'll find Sahih International is an okay translation. Okay? Put that translation below each ayah. So you write each ayah, and if you look some of these websites, they'll give you a word for word. Do the word for word and then put the whole translation there. Okay? And then now try and remember each ayah and what it means now, because since you've translated it, try and understand what the translation is referring to. So what each ayah means. Try and memorize that. And then put on that recitation and close your eyes and then listen to him. And as he's reciting, remember the meanings that you had worked out. I guarantee you will smile. 100%, I guarantee you will smile. Try it out. This is your homework. Let's proceed, inshallah. So, when people ask me, do I have to learn the Arabic language in order to learn the deen? Do I have to learn Arabic to learn the Quran, to understand the Quran? To learn the deen, the religion, at least the fundamentals, you don't need to learn the Arabic language. You can learn the religion in any language. And don't let these people discourage you. You know, I've seen some of these people that discourage, especially when people just come into the religion and then they're told, oh, you can't do anything until first of all you have to learn the Arabic language, which in itself is difficult. It's not a simple thing like learning English, especially for Westerners, because the English language has a different orientation and therefore a different neural, pathway in their brains, and now they have to do a completely different orientation and rewire their thinking to a newer language. It's a difficult path. And so you see, they get discouraged when they're told, oh, you have to learn. You don't have to. You can learn your deen in any language. And many of the languages of our tradition in the Muslim countries, they're more than proficient to, convey the religion and its meanings and its rulings and all that, and the fiqh and the sharia. So Urdu, for example, is now a scholastic language in our tradition. It is. So a lot of the books are printed in Urdu. If you're in Bangladesh, you'll find a lot of scholarly works written in Bengali, and you can learn the religion in that. In Turkey, a lot of the books, Turkish has long been a scholastic language, especially the Ottoman the Ottoman Turkish, which is slightly different than modern standard Turkish. But you can learn so I can tell you, for example, that in order to be a good Muslim, you have to give testimony that God is one and that Muhammad is his messenger. You have to pray 5 times a day. You have to fast in the month of Ramadan. You have to pay your alms every lunar cycle, and you have to prepare yourself for pilgrimage to Mecca. I just gave you the basic of religion, the 5 pillars of Islam. In English, I haven't used a single Arabic word in there. Right? Now, in order for you to fulfill those 5 pillars, you're going to have to learn a little bit of Arabic, especially Salah, because you can only recite the Quran in Arabic. You cannot recite it in English. And recitation of the Quran, learning that is not difficult. That's why that's one of the first things that we teach children, because they pick it up immediately. It's very easy because you just need to learn the phonemes and the sounds that make and how to recognize the symbols, and then eventually memorize the symbols and the sounds they make. So learning the recitation or the pronunciation of a language is easy. Now, learning the meanings and how the words come together and what they convey, that's a more difficult path. What about the Quran then? Yes, for an entry level, somebody who is on a subsistent level, a base level. So you've got 3 levels of understanding. You've got the what question, you've got the how and whether question, and then you've got the why question. The what question is the tasawwur. It's a surface analysis. So subjective knowledge, subjective information is usually on this subsistent level. You can look at a translation of the Quran or somebody's explanation, like a Mufassir's translation, and you can still have a connection with the Quran and understand the basic knowledge that is being conveyed and wisdom that is being conveyed. You can still do that. So what you're doing in this instance is, because you don't know the language. So here is somebody who knows both the languages. He knows your language and he knows the Arabic language. And so he goes in, and I'm not talking about anyone random in the street. So you go and look for an Arab on the streets of Bahrain and you come and tell him, can you explain to me what this ayah means? That's not what I'm talking about. Okay? Somebody who is a scholar, who has studied the sciences, because the Quran has requisite knowledges. There are sciences that go with that. Ibn Juzay al-Kalbi lists 12 of them. He says, before you can even speak on the Quran, you have to learn these 12 sciences. Tafsir, qira'at, ahkam, hadith, usulul deen, usulul fiqh, qasas, and then lugha, bayan, balagha. And there's 2 more I forgot. But you have to learn these records. So you find somebody who knows these sciences, who has mastered these sciences, is a scholar of the Quran. And so you are trusting this individual to give you the right interpretation or the right explanation or translation. So this individual looks at the Quran, he understands what the ayat mean, then he gives you an explanation in your language. There's a translation so you can look at some of the translations that they have done of Ibn Kathir's tafsir, for example, or Imam al-Qurtubi's tafsir. You can read the tafsir and you can gain some understanding of the Quran, but that's a very base understanding. Let me not kid you. That is just base level. For you to go into the higher levels of the how, whether this, whether that, when now you're doing this analysis, you cannot do it in a translated language. I'm sorry. You cannot do that in a translated language. You have to do it in the source language. You have to do it in the original language. There's no, you have to remove the middleman from there. You can still refer to the middleman because he has more knowledge than you, but you have to do it in the source language because you cannot do this elimination. Does it mean this? Could it mean that? Is it possible that this comes into this? Maybe this connects to that. You cannot do that. The more higher level, which is the why question, qiyas is even more dangerous because qiyas is min al-ma'lum ila al-majhul. You're going from the known into unknown elements. It's uncharted territory. And you can't just go in blindly without knowing, because the Quran, inna anzalnahu Qur'anan Arabiyan. We have sent it down as an Arabic Quran, not as Hebrew, not as English, not as Urdu, not as Malay, not as Punjabi, not as Arabic Quran. لَعَلَّكُمْ تَعْقِلُونَ. So that you can intellect, so that you can reason, so that you can think, so that you can expand your understanding. It has to be done in the original language. And for that now, you have to study the Arabic language. You can approach the deen from the basic that I gave you. And there are many books that have been written by scholars in English only. No Arabic terminology, only in English. But when it comes to you now going into the more deeper elements of the deen, for instance, if you want to read a more complex tafsir like Fakhruddin al-Razi, translation will not do you any good. And this is why they've never translated it. I mean, now they're trying to translate it, but it's not easy. First of all, it's a voluminous work. There are multiple volumes. And it's so in-depth. And Fakhruddin al-Razi speaks philosophically. So imagine now trying to translate that. You see, for that now, you have to learn Arabic, because in order to read scholastic literature, you have to do it in the original language. You can pick up a book translated by someone. You'll find Imam al-Ghazali's books translated for the benefit of people, right? But that will only give you a surface. For you to truly understand what Ghazali is talking about, you have to go in the original text. That's why the other day, when we were doing a reading from his book, I was doing the Arabic and giving you the explanation in English. I could have just given you the explanation in English, but you saw when I was giving you the statements in Arabic, there was something more profound in there. There is Ghazali's wisdom there that is also coming out, because those are his words. Same case applies. Allah has chosen the Arabic language to deliver the Quran. Make the effort to understand it in the medium that He has chosen. Why would you want things to be done conveniently to your convenience? Why can't you make the effort to do it? If you love Allah, if you truly love Him with your heart, not just I love Allah. You know those Facebook pages, I love Allah page? Huh? Not that kind of I love Allah. If you truly love your Lord, then make the effort. Why? You make the effort for your girlfriend or your boyfriend. You can't make the effort for your creator. Make the effort, learn the language. So why the Arabic language? That's another question that I was asked at one point. Why the Arabic language? English is the lingua franca today. We're having all these lecture sessions, everything in English. So why the Arabic language? I mean, much of language is translatable. Because the Arabic language has a unique property. See, Arabic language is not just something for learning the Quran or understanding the Quran. It's not just for that. With the Arabic language, there is an opening that you get when you learn Arabic. Because if you look back in history, and those who study linguistics or history of languages, Latin, Greek, Chinese, Sanskrit, and I'm going to use these four for example, okay, in comparison now. Not English. English is a derived language and it's arbitrary for the most part. In fact, you should look up the history of how they compiled the Oxford Dictionary. It was amazing. The way they did it was pretty amazing, but a lot of the words were contributed from people, right? So it could be a slang word, but it was brought into the language. So what they did was that they told the people, they wrote to the people, into the public, to send them a word that they knew and a reference to a literary work in which that word is found, so that it could at least have some academic proficiency, something. So it's not just picked up from the street. Anyway, my point is, English is not a scholastic language. It can be an academic language, but not a scholastic language. If you look at Latin, Greek, Chinese, and Sanskrit, all these languages have biases. And I'm not talking about cultural or traditional or ethnical bias. I'm not talking about that. If you look at Latin, Latin is a very analytic language. Its bias is on logic. So the Romans were brilliant logicians and very strategic thinkers and analytical thinkers. You see? Because language defines thought. Now, if you look at the Greek were very good in sophistry. Because the Greek language has this slippery nature. So it's a rhetorically, in rhetoric, it's a very, very nice language. And this is why it was more suited to philosophy than Latin. And this is why also the Romans were not so good in philosophy in as much as the Greeks were good in philosophy. And even though the Greeks introduced the concept of logic, the science, Aristotle, the Romans were better suited to logic than the Greeks. Right? Because the language is like that. The bias of the language is very analytic. Now, if you look at Chinese is a very complicated language. And that's the bias of Chinese. So the reason why I'm giving you this is to show you why the Arabic language was chosen and why not Greek or Latin or Chinese or Hebrew or Sanskrit. Why weren't these languages chosen to receive the Quran? So Chinese, classical Chinese is very complicated, which is why now you have traditional Chinese and then you have simplified Chinese. The Chinese language is a rich language, but it's too complex. It has an incredibly vast vocabulary. It has an incredibly vast array of characters, orthography. It also has a vast array of phonetics. So some of the phonemes in the Chinese language are so nuanced that you might not even realize the difference in sounding, and yet you could make incredible mistakes in speech. So people who know traditional Chinese, they can easily pick up a mistake when somebody speaks, and they can see the contrast of the error in meaning. You see, you can't have that kind of a language taking on the speech of Allah. Why? Because for you to have perfect clarity of the speech of Allah, you need to be proficient in a very complex language. And that simply doesn't work for people who were of the Bedouin desert origin. So why wasn't then Hebrew chosen? Well, because the Hebrew people, the Jews, they didn't have a lexicology. Simple as that. The language was dead. It was just an oral tradition. They had no written tradition. They didn't have a lexicology. They didn't have dictionaries. They didn't have anything. Even though they had over 2,000 years of revelation in their tradition, at least up until the point where the Quran was revealed, they didn't have dictionaries way up until the 9th, 10th century, 8th, 9th, 10th century. When they saw the Muslims were compiling dictionaries, they realized, oh, we should have done the same thing. And now, up until recently, when this illegal state of Israel was founded, Hebrew was a dead language. No one spoke it. Now they've tried to revive it, but whatever they've revived right now is just an arbitrary language. They have just picked words from scripture here and there, whatever they think has meaning, and much of it has been just brought in from the West. You know, part of it is from the Yiddish origins of the Jews, the European Jews who are in Poland, of the Khazarian descent. So there's a different kind of a language that has been, you know, seeped into that side. So Hebrew, where it stands, is not pure. Arabic has been preserved from the very beginning. Now, if you look at Arab history, you'll find that the peak of the language was right at the time of the Prophet ﷺ. So the language went through a process. When you compare ancient Nabatean scripts or Sabaean scripts, or some of the Yemeni, you know, carvings that they find, and other stuff that they find, say, in Aramaic and Syriac, you find this connection that Arabic has. And it has this connection because this is a language that has gone through transformation since the beginning. So, and what I mean by that is that Arabic actually traces its roots right up to Adam alayhi salam. Not the same Arabic, not the Arabic of the Quran as it was sent down at that time period, but as a morphology has taken place from that time up until the point where Nabi Muhammad was to receive revelation. This is why the language and the method of thinking, the way the prophets think, are all alike, because they all have the same source language. You understand? They all have the same source language. It's a bit complex because I'm giving you all of human history condensed in 2 minutes. It's not easy. But if we sit down and we do a proper class, inshallah, then we can go into each piece and I can explain better. All right? But the point I'm trying to draw is that Arabic reached its peak maturity at the time of revelation, means it was ready. And this was not coincidental. This was ordained. Perfect timing. We're going to talk about time in a future session, inshallah. But perfect timing. Precisely calculated. That at the moment when the Arabic language has reached its peak maturity in poetry, in logic, in rhetoric, in grammar. Well, grammar as a science was not established at the time, but the grammar was pure. That's the moment when the Quran is sent down. So that the speech of Allah can now be embedded into this richly intellectual language. And all these scholars of language in history, even in modern history, in recent history, not recent, in modern history, I would say, even in linguistics, even Orientalists, they have to affirm that this is not an arbitrary language. And arbitrary means that a group of people came together, decided, let's call this, and let's call that, and let's make this shape like this. No, it's not an arbitrary language. Because of this incredible inflectious ability and simultaneously analytical ability. The Arabic language is a balance of all these other languages. It has a perfect balance of logic, and you can philosophize with the language as well. And you can have poetry in the language as well. And likewise, you can have a vast vocabulary, and you can have complex mechanisms in the language as well. You can have sciences and you can have arts as well in the language. You can have mathematics as well in the language. With these other languages, they are biased in their aspects. This is why modern science, a lot of it uses like biology or botany, prefers to use Latin words because of that definitive nature of the language. It's very, very precise. The Arabic language is precise, it's got precision, incredible precision, but it's also nuanced. So it has a flexibility. It's not defined and rigid like Latin. You see? Now Arabic has a more fluid like grammar. Latin has a very rigid grammar, and that makes it much more complex to learn than Arabic. This is why it became a dead language, because the intellective ability of the peoples was not maintained. They were not a people or a civilization that was focused on the preservation and pursuit of knowledge like the Muslims. The Muslims were concerned with the preservation and pursuit of knowledge. And in order to do that, they had to preserve the sciences. And so that is what they did. They preserved all the sciences that are related to the language. In doing so, they preserved the language. And in doing that, they contributed to the preservation of the Quran. This is divine ordinance. Only Allah could have inspired such a people, rightly guided, to do that in a manner that preserves the Quran up until today. That no matter where you come from, whichever part of the world you are in, whichever language you speak, when you recite the Quran, you all recite it the same way. The tajweed is the same. The pronunciation is the same. The melody might change, the mode might change, the mood might change, because there's mood as well in language. All that might change. But the tajweed, the pronunciation is the same because the language has been preserved. This is why the Arabic language is tawqifiyah. So, do you think it's important to learn the Arabic language? Everyone is asking, whoever is asking me or asking anybody else, is it important? Do I have to? What do you think? Do you have to learn the Arabic language? Or should you learn the Arabic language? Do you think it's an imposition on you? Or is that something you want to do just for yourself to have an improvement of intellection? Let me give you an example. Let me give you something that will show you really how incredible the Arabic language is. Most of the scholastic languages, they have what's known as a root word system. Okay, a trilateral, some have a bilateral, some have a quadrilateral root system. So the Arabic language, most commonly, for much of the language uses a trilateral root system. Now, this trilateral root system, and even the same applies to the bilateral or the quadrilateral, or then there are 5 letter root systems, and then there are also 6 letter root systems, which are very rare. The trilateral, which is common, actually follows logic insofar as the 5 predicables are concerned. And people can argue this with me, but it doesn't really matter. This is what I found. The trilateral root system in Arabic follows logic, because we say that Arabic is one of those languages where symbol meets reality. Symbol meets reality, like it's right there. I'll give you an example. Look at the word kalama. Okay? Kalama. Ka, la, and ma. The ka, its point of articulation is in the back of the throat. Ka. Comes from there. The la comes from the open space in the mouth and where the lips come in. The tongue comes up to the jaw, la. And then the ma is with the lips pressed. Now, what does kalama mean in Arabic? It means he spoke. Kalam is speech. So kalama, where symbol meets reality, is expressing the meaning of speech as it is executed in reality, where it starts from the throat, it enters into the mouth, and then it exits the lips. Kalama. Kalama. You see? Symbol meeting reality. I'll give you another example, and this is more interesting because it pertains to our study. The self, the soul, nafs. Now, the trilateral root system, and I'll show you how the word nafs works. You've got, in logic, you've got the 5 predicables, okay? So in the trilateral root system, we're only interested in the first 3, not the other 2. So the first 3 from the 5. You have the genus, which is the overall umbrella. And then you have the species, which is sort of like one from the whole group, okay? And then you've got the differentia, which differentiates this one species from all the other species in that group. So you've got the jins, the naw', and the fasl. Okay, so a human being, for example, is from the animal kingdom, right? And so he's a species from the animal kingdom. Then you look for what differentiates the human being. The human being can speak, so the logicians called it hal hayawanun natiq, the speaking animal. So the differentia, the fact that this is a different quality from all the other qualities. It's a unique quality. So that's what determines the species and then and which part of the genus it is in. So in the Arabic trilateral root system, the first letter is usually the genus. And then the second letter is the species of that genus. And then the third letter is now what differentiates each word from every other word in that group of words. So if you look at the word nafs or nafasa, you've got in the thuluthi verb system, you've got different bab, right? So you've got dhammu dhammi, you've got kasru fathi, right? Like that. So you've got words like nafusa yamfusu, or you've got nafisa yamfisu, right? Each of those configurations has a different meaning, but all those meanings are interrelated. And this is the unique thing about the Arabic language. The root words, are all interconnected if they are from the same genus of words. So if you look, the noon is a resonating letter. Noon, right? Like in kun. And that's another beautiful example of this unique aspect of that thing, where symbol means reality. So if you look at the ka again, the ka is a cutting letter. Ka. Right? It doesn't have vibration before it or after it. K. That's it. So it's pinpoint. And then the noon is resonating. So you have kun, kun. So the way you would understand that is when Allah gives his amr, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not bound by this world and the aspects of this world, which include time. He's not bound by time. So when human beings think, there's a time lapse between the formation of the thought and the formulation of, between the formulation of the thought and the formation of the thought. So the thought is being formulated. You have an idea, and then you start formulating the thought process, and then you form the thought, and then you make the will or the intent to do the action. There's time that takes place in between that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not affected by that. So his amr is as it occurs. So right there, be. But then there is a process that goes through. The process of the becoming. So he issues the command, and then the command is now executed. That's the kun. So that's the be, and the command is executed. You see? Fa yakun. So it becomes. Meaning the process now takes place. You see, understand? So the noon is a resonating letter. Noon. Okay? That's the soul now in its genus. The soul is something that resonates. It's in constant resonance. And I don't mean vibration, because it's not a physical thing. It's not vibrating, it's resonating. Means it's got a melody of sorts or an oscillation of sort. Everything in the created realm has a resonance. The soul also has a resonance. But so how do we differentiate the soul from everything else that's resonating? That's given by the fa. Now, the second letter, because now we want to determine the species. You've got the genus of resonating objects. You know that the soul is one of them. How do you determine that now? That fa, if you look at fa, it's a letter that is related to a flow of air. It's the fa. It's the fa. So this resonating soul is a breathing soul. That's its resonance. Its resonance is that it is breathing. And that breathing, we're not referring to the lungs. We're referring to this expansion and contraction. The soul is constantly doing this. There's an expansion and a contraction that's taking place. That's the soul. Okay? Now, if you look at now, so how do we now differentiate this soul from every other soul? That's now given by the seen, which is now the differential. So you've got nafisa, which means to begrudge, to be miserly, to be envious, to withhold, or to give with reluctance. That's nafisa. But so that's a contraction. But then you've got nafasa, which means to help others, to ease the burden of others, to give willingly, to be more open about it. So that's the expansion, right? Then you've got for example, you've got nafas. Now nafas literally means breath. So where the seen has got no designation. You understand? So we say nafisa, nafusa, nafasa. So that seen has got a designation to the fa, where the fa is a shidda, or the fa is a kasra, or the fa is a dhamma. But then you've got the seen, which is given a sukun there, has got no designation. Means breath. So from that now, you start getting a different semantic field. Because now you can change the differentia. You can change the seen and put a ha. You get nafaha, which means to blow softly. Nafaha. Because the ha is a soft breath. Ha. Right? Then you can change the ha and you put a kha. So now you have nafaha, right? So because now kha is a more thrusting breath. So nafaha means to blow, like, right? So in that ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَنَفَخْتُ فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِ. When I blow into him my spirit, my ruh, right? That's the kha. And then you can change the kha to put tha. You get nafatha. And tha is a restricting breath. So because the tha is restricting it, there's still some breath, but then, right, it's being constricted. Then from there you can get another semantic field now. You can get nafaqa, which means to be depleted, right? To sell out all your wares, for example, if you're a merchant, all your goods. You would say huwa nafaqa. He sold out all his goods. And so because why is it to be depleted? Because the qaf is a heavy letter. It weighs down on you. So you feel depleted. You're mentally exhausted. That's nafaqa. Now, from that nafaqa, you can get nafaqa. So if the nafaqa is to sell out all the material, the alif in there adds something else to sell out everything, including yourself. And that's where now you get the word munafiq. Because who is a munafiq? Who's a hypocrite? A hypocrite is someone who sells himself. He sold himself for coin or for whatever else. You see? This is the language. This is how the language is inflectious. I'll give you another example and we'll end with this inshallah because we are running on time now. Take the word Araba. Okay? Araba, if you look, modern dictionaries will say that the word Araba means Arab. Okay? Classical dictionaries will not give you that. Araba in classical Arabic, Araba means language. Now, if you take the Araba and then you switch out the Ra and Ba, you will get Abara. Okay? Abara. And then when you switch out the Ba and Ain, you will get Bara'a. So Araba means language. And Abara means crossover. And Bara'a means excellence. Or it can even mean to shine. So what language does is it helps you cross over and increase your intellection and gives you that excellence. Right? I can give you positive words and change your hal, make you cross over from a negative state where you're feeling depressed maybe or sad into a positive state where now you're happy. I've made you cross over. Now you're happy, you're excellent. Language can do that. But if you take the same word and you switch out, so from Araba, you switch the Ra, you take the Ba and put it before, now you have Ba'ara. Ba'ara means dung. Dung. So what happens when your language is foul? It's vulgar. When you use bad language, it's like dung, coming out. You know when somebody says he's just speaking crap? He's talking crap. Or the other one, bullshit. That's what it is. Foul language. Right? What does that do? If you then take the Ra and switch it with the Ba, you get Ra'aba. One of its meanings is horrifying. It's horrifying. It's astounding. It's really astounding. And then if you switch that again, you get Raba'a, one of its meanings of Raba'a, because Ruba'a means quarter, right? So one of the meanings of Raba'a is to cut off, to sort of, like when you have a hole and you make a quarter, right? So each piece now you can make quarters out of that as well. You sort of disintegrate it now. So it depletes you. It breaks you down. So good language, Araba, good language takes you to excellence. Araba, Abara, right? Bara, it takes you to excellence. Bad language reduces you to something foul and useless and just rubbish. That's what bad language does. That's how the language works. Isn't that amazing? Now, isn't that enough of an incentive for you to learn the Arabic language so you can do all these amazing things with the words? Let's end here, inshallah, because we've taken up a lot of time. I actually wanted to talk more. There was more that I wanted to speak about when it comes to the Quran. There was a few other elements here, but this is a subject. When I get started, I can go on and on. So we'll just stop here for now, and inshallah, maybe we'll do something else another time, inshallah, as a continuum of this. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين سبحانك وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا الله نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا يا مولانا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. بارك الله فيكم والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. جزاك الله خيرا. We'll see you guys tomorrow inshallah. جزاكم.